Shabbat Shalom, friends. Thank you. When the moon is in the 7th house and Jupiter aligns with Mars, then peace will guide the planets and love will steer the stars. I know. All together? This is the dawning of the Aquarius, Aquarius. Oh boy, talk about great harmonies, right? That was beautiful, everyone. And in fact, Fifth Dimension goes on to sing, right? Harmony and understanding, sympathy and trust abounding, no more falsehoods or derisions, golden living dreams of visions, mystic crystal revelation, and the mind's true liberation. Ah, the music of my pre-childhood. Great stuff. When the moon, I briefly thought about saying, hits your eye like a big pizza pie, but I thought we'd go another way. Lots to choose from. But the thought of the stars and the planets aligning is such an uplifting thought. And I need a little uplift today because I'm really surprised, actually, at how sorry I am that I'm not going to be under the eclipse that begins on Monday. Let me get the time right. Starting at 2:07 p.m. April 8th in Rochester, at least that's where our friends of mine are going to be, but continuing for several minutes. They say about 3 minutes and 38 seconds, which is twice as long as the one in 2017. So depending on where you are, it'll be Monday afternoon. They say the difference between 99% and 100% is unimaginably beautiful. And it just didn't get on my bucket list early enough, and I just want to wish everyone who will be experiencing that celestial phenomenon good luck, and that their travels should be safe, and that they should have the experience that they want. So the moon has been very much on my mind the last few days, and apropos of moon being in a 7th house and planets aligning, it really is extraordinary if we stop and think about it for a second, that this amazing lunar and solar phenomenon that's going to happen on Monday, please God, also aligns with Rosh Chodesh, with the new month of Nisan, the first month of the Jewish year, and that it would have also aligned with Shabbat HaChodesh, the Shabbat of the moon. It really is uplifting and beautiful when things like that line up all together. Maybe it is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. It kind of can't get here soon enough. But the moon has been very much on a lot of people's minds the last many days and weeks as we get to this Shabbat of the month, the first month of the Jewish year. And I know that can be a little confusing because we say, well, Rosh Hashanah, when we start counting a new year, is actually in the 7th month. It's as though whenever your birthday is, that's the start of your new year, but it may not be in January, which is the start of the Gregorian and secular new year. So we need to remember that this coming Monday night is actually the beginning of the Jewish year. It is the month of months. This glorious month where we're going to celebrate Passover, and when we remember the night, the midnight, the terrible night of the final plague that brought in and ushered in the first Passover and the Israelites' journey into freedom, away from bondage after so long. But those dark nights, those nights really, we can call it a new moon, and we usually do, but my beloved teacher in LA refers to Rosh Chodesh as the night of no moon. When the moon is certainly there, but we can't see it, at least just only in the tiniest sliver. And I was reminded this week that in ancient times, the moonless nights were considered terrifying. It was as if something had died in the heavens. Ancient peoples made noise and blew horns to chase away evil spirits, or perhaps to awaken the deceased moon back to life. It's a really kind of fascinating thing to think about. Rabbi Finley teaches, thinking of those ancient people making all of these noises because of the darkness. Darkness back then meant a lot different than it does today, when we have far too many light sources and we don't go through that experience of utter and total darkness. Now, eclipses have always been frightening and wondrous and terrifying and marvelous. But I think for so many people who are going to stand in that total darkness and see the light emanating from the solar plexus, it's supposed to be so extraordinary that you're never really quite the same. So maybe a little of that can rub off on all of us in one way or another. But that deep darkness that the world or people in the path of the eclipse are plunged into, or even just if we're lucky enough to be in a place on a so-called moonless night, it should be a time for introspection. We talk about the dark side of the moon, and I've been seeing that phrase a lot showing up this week. It's obviously not a new concept. The dark side of the moon, which has this sense of mystery, something unknown, something that we can't access. I've actually discovered this week that, I guess we kind of know this, that the descriptor dark side of the moon is really problematic. Because, as Pink Floyd reminds us at the end of their iconic Dark Side of the Moon album, one of the best-selling albums of all times, and the true and first concept album, meaning in its 42 minutes it really deals with one subject throughout. If you don't know it, it's fascinating. I'm not remotely endorsing the primary creative genius behind it. He's a reprehensible individual that the rest of the band has broken with, but his art is pretty undeniable. And at the very end of Dark Side of the Moon, we're reminded there really is no dark side of the moon. It's actually all dark. You have to listen very closely to hear the final line of the album, but it's really quite fascinating. The dark side of the moon, the name of it is actually problematic because it suggests that shadows are perpetually cloaking the surface of one side of the moon. But that actually isn't true. The dark side of the moon shifts as the lunar day progresses, so it's actually more accurate to say that the moon has a day side and a night side, just like the Earth. The day side is the side that receives sunlight, and the night side faces away from the sun. So it gets a little confusing because the side of the moon that we see, when it's lit up, it's the day side. And when it's not, it's the night side. So it depends on when during the lunar day we're seeing the moon. More accurate term to describe the side of the moon we see really would be the near side. The side opposite the near side is the far side. So maybe that's what Gary Larson was talking about in The Far Side. I didn't think about that actually. The near side will always face toward us, and the far side will always face away. That's just the way it works. That is called gravity, and it's due to our relationship with the moon that we always see the near side. But the dark side has fascinated people forever. What's on that other side? What is our relationship to the far side or the dark side? It's more than I will dray you with today, but it's not without noticing that when we speak of the dark side, we're not just talking about something that's illuminated or something in the night sky or just something that lurks somewhere in the shadows. When we speak about the dark side, people are generally talking about something that lurks within them or within human beings or within all of creation that really is frightening, that has the power to do tremendous damage to ourselves and other people. I've been a little consumed also the last few weeks with Jekyll and Hyde, which is coming to Los Angeles over the next couple weeks. I don't know if anyone has seen that concept musical. It's it's based loosely on the novella by Robert Louis Stevenson, which I read just the other day for the first time. Actually really worth a read. Lots of themes, probably a sermon for another day, so I'll hold that in check. But just that sense of something hiding, not for nothing did Stevenson call the demonic presence within him Mr. Hyde, maybe for lots of reasons, but something that's hiding within, that he aims with his powerful draught of a tincture that he puts together using his chemistry knowledge. He never fully explains the recipe, thankfully, but that separates, that he thinks he's going to separate from himself so that oneself can live apart in sort of a good and noble place, and the other side, that dark side of himself, can maybe be vanquished. Of course, what he learns is the exact opposite. The dark side is always there and ultimately takes over. So when we're looking up safely, please, at the eclipse this week from wherever we are, let's just remember that that dark side is always there, and that it lives within us, and it has much to say to us in the dark night of the soul. But there's also something incredibly full of potential and light. The moon does not give off its own light, obviously. It reflects the sun. And there's so much that we can take from this world and reflect back, for good or for ill. When we're feeling dark ourselves, when we feel like we're too tiny to make a difference, remember the power of the moon. Infinitesimally small compared to the power and presence of the sun. And yet that tiny little speck of a moon has the power to affect people's lives and nature and people's souls so extraordinarily. Not for nothing are the Jewish people compared themselves to the moon, tiny and overwhelmed by forces that would seek to destroy us, and yet with the capability of blotting out so much that might come to burn us or to destroy us. Let us take comfort from the voices that we can listen to quietly in the darkness, and from the magnificent moon. All of it is dark, but with the power to transform the world, even for a few minutes in time. May it be the dawning of the age of Aquarius in one way or another, and may we be inspired by the phases of the moon that we celebrate most especially on this Shabbat of the moon. Shabbat Shalom.